The year is 2018. The top movies were Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, and Incredibles 2. And we couldn't wait to see Endgame. Like, what happened after Thanos snapped out half of the population? Rage baiters were all over the internet, such as Lil Tay and Wovicki. And most of your short form content came from Instagram, and I guess some of it still does. But Instagram Reels didn't exist, which I guess the world was a better place without Instagram Reels. Musical.ly has just transitioned into TikTok. And everything TikTok was associated with was the I'm Already Tracer song and Hit or Miss. Hit or miss. I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya, mwah. He won't find another girl and he won't miss ya. I was an awkward high schooler at the time. I was trying to make new friends, but I thought I was a normie. Guess what? I wasn't. I was an autistic teenager trying to find their footing in high school. Hello, my Nimbuses, and welcome to Cloud Tunes. I am your host, NC, and we're gonna talk about Ralph Breaks the Internet. Which, we're not exactly gonna talk about the movie itself. We're just gonna talk about how it aged like milk, because that movie came out in 2018. And it kind of relied overly on internet trends. Do I think the movie's terrible? Well, I don't want you to go after me. I do not think it's a terrible movie. I did watch Schaefer-Rilla's review on that film, and while I can agree with some points, I think he was a little too harsh on that movie, to be honest. One thing he said about Ralph Breaks the Internet is that it was basically Disney's The Emoji Movie. And if your movie is being compared to The Emoji Movie, that is not a good sign. If you don't know, The Emoji Movie released in 2017, and it was widely critically panned and hated by both critics and audiences. And I do agree The Emoji Movie was terrible. But the difference between Ralph Breaks the Internet and The Emoji Movie is that The Emoji Movie made zero sense at all. Like, the logic wasn't there. Like, your phone doesn't center around emojis, for the love of God. They're just used to text and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the apps that were shown within the Emoji Movie, such as Candy Crush, don't really use emojis. I just found it really weird, and I was like, where is the logic? Like, emojis are just used to text. At least with Ralph Breaks the Internet, I saw some logic there. And I kind of liked how the internet was portrayed. And I'm probably going to explain it later in this video, but I think it's a superior version to The Emoji Movie. Like, do I think it's a perfect movie? No! And I am obviously gonna criticize this movie. That's why I made that video. But there is logic there of how the internet is portrayed. And you know, have your own opinion. It's okay to say Ralph Breaks the Internet is a horrible movie, but do I think it's horrible? Nope. But this video is mainly to criticize the biggest weakness within Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is the use of product placement. And to be honest, yes, a lot of movies have been criticized for using product placement even today. And yeah, while product placement can be a bad thing, if it's used in a smart way, I think actually it could be a very effective way of satirizing a certain product or commentary. I would say The Amazing World of Gumball is really good at satirizing certain products and franchises. I actually made a video about The Amazing World of Gumball, which probably aged as bad as Ralph Breaks the Internet, but one of the recent episodes of The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball that just released had a reference to Skibbity Toilet and brain rot. So I think that's actually an effective way to reference product placement and certain franchises outside of its own. But I feel like Ralph Breaks the Internet was mainly a giant crossover movie. Like, a big part of its advertising was the fact that all the princesses were going to be a part of it. And obviously, it was going to incentivize people to want to watch it. Like, look, every Disney princess is interacting in the same room. That was part of its advertising. But we're going to get on to the movie itself. So, the movie begins with Ralph telling a Pac-Man joke, which I didn't have too much of a problem with. It was like, what is a yellow dot that eats dots? I think that was the joke. But it had something to do with Pac-Man. Of course, everybody knows who Pac-Man is. Like, those games are timeless. So, and he appeared in the first Wreck-It Ralph movie. So, I didn't have too much of an issue of the use of Pac-Man. What I will say, what I did like about the first Wreck-It Ralph, is while it did use already established video game characters such as Sonic the Hedgehog, Bowser, and Pac-Man, they were integrated in a sensical way. The film took place in an arcade, and typically you will find characters such as Sonic the Hedgehog in an arcade. And they were well used in that manner, and they weren't like the main part of the advertising. So I think the Pac-Man joke was kind of a fine start to Ralph Breaks the Internet. But then we get into the beginning conflict of this movie, which is Vanellope is bored of being a part of Sugar Rush, which is the game she's a part of. She was a racer in Sugar Rush for 6 years, and in the first movie, it was her dream to be a master racer in Sugar Rush. Well, that was just boring to her. She always hung out with Ralph when the arcade was closed. So what does Ralph do for Vanellope to make it more entertaining? Ralph builds a new track for Vanellope to have a more entertaining race at Sugar Rush. However, this breaks the Sugar Rush console and the wheel falls off. And to buy a new wheel, it was extremely expensive, and there was only one listing on eBay. So the first product placement was the site eBay. I don't think it's too bad. Like, actually Finding Nemo has made references to eBay itself, and I don't think people had too many problems with that. Fix-It Felix. Yeah, we're gonna talk a bit about Fix-It Felix. He thought the site was called eBoy. And oh my god, that is going to be said throughout the film. Do you actually know what an e-boy is? It's giving me flashbacks to 2019 TikTok. Well, this came out before the whole e-boy, e-girl stuff, but if you know what I mean. The Sugar Rush wheel costed more than the amount that the game Sugar Rush made in that year. So the person, or the worker at the arcade, decided to disconnect Sugar Rush, and everybody in Sugar Rush was basically homeless refugees. So a new plug comes into the arcade, and it has like this Wi-Fi symbol. So it's Wi-Fi, and I think one of the coolest references is that the video game arcade worker actually uses an eMac, like, you know, those early 2000s eMacs. Obviously, they're very slow. Like, he's clearly an older dude, so he probably doesn't know much about the internet. I thought it was a cool reference. So they plug it in, and everybody is very confused. Sonic initially thought it was a pinball game, while Ralph reads it as wifey and thinks it's an arranged marriage game. Like, is it a dating sim? According to Ralph, I don't know. But, yeah, I guess Ralph wanted to have a wifey. Sorry, not making these references. But Sonic knew exactly what it was. Sonic the Hedgehog Well, he's seen stuff on the internet of himself. If you know the Sonic fandom, so I wouldn't be surprised. Like, dude is probably traumatized by his hashtag on DeviantArt. But he explains to Ralph and Vanellope of what Wi-Fi is. But nobody was allowed to enter the Wi-Fi game. Everybody had to return to their own games. When all the Sugar Rush refugees came out, they were housed in Fix-It Felix Jr. And Felix and Calhoun, like, their only plot point in the entire film was they adopted 15 Sugar Rush children together. I kind of wish that was more expanded upon in the film. It was just like a funny, like, gag, I guess, throughout the beginning of the film. And these Sugar Rush children were obviously very chaotic. So once Vanellope loses her game, or Vanellope and Ralph, they want to buy a steering wheel from eBay. And the way they figure out how to do that is to go through the internet, because eBay is an internet site. So Ralph and Vanellope, when they're not supposed to, go through the internet. And initially, the internet seems boring. They're just like in the connection space, or kind of like when you're in settings and you're trying to like look for the right network when you're in a new place. And it seemed dim, dark, boring. But then Ralph and Vanellope, they go through an optical terminal, which is basically where they go through a service wire to get to the internet space. So they're basically no longer at the arcade, and then they are transported through a fantastical internet land. Well, maybe I wouldn't say a fantastical internet land, because let's be honest, the internet is kind of a hellscape, but throughout this Fruitiger Eero city, or internet land, here are the first few product placements I saw. Amazon, IMDb, and Fandango, which, yeah, Amazon is probably one of the most used sites on the internet. I don't know how they didn't sue Disney, because I think Amazon Prime is currently a huge competitor to Disney+. And IMDb is commonly used for finding information on certain kinds of media, like movies, shows. People can rate certain medias. I was chronically on that site in high school and middle school, and I had like so many embarrassing lists on there. It's still used. Fandango is a site to find movie tickets. As I mentioned, this film was made in 2018, meaning people did go to the movies more often than nowadays. I know that was like only 8 years ago, but you gotta remember, 2018 was pre-pandemic times. And the first character in the internet Ralph and Vanellope meet is a character called Knowsmore. Kind of looks like Walden from Wow Wow Wubbsy, I'm gonna be honest, with the glasses and the fact that he's purple. Can you tell the difference between these two characters? I don't think you can. But they do meet Knowsmore. He is a search engine, a non-AI powered search engine, which I'm like, oh, okay. And they want to look for the Sugar Rush wheel. So Ralph and Vanellope ask Knowsmore for the Sugar Rush wheel. And Knowsmore, while he's searching for the Sugar Rush wheel, he brings up as a suggestion Urban Outfitters. Okay. Was that just like a product placement to make the audience laugh in the theaters? So Ralph and Vanellope by Knowsmore were led to eBay, and while they were led to eBay, we did have like a couple of interesting shots, like the shot of Twitter, which is depicted as a tree with birds. This obviously didn't age well, because when the muskrat took over Twitter, I'm sure he burned down the trees and made it into a racetrack with a bunch of Cybertrucks carrying out posts and stuff. And then they would have something for like Grok AI. I feel like Grok AI would be like one of the rocket ships that the muskrat tried to send into space Like, now it's even more of a hell site than it was back in 2018. I did think it was actually kind of a creative idea of how they portrayed Twitter, but too bad it didn't age well. Another gag throughout this montage is they show the Google building, and Ralph believes it was called Goggle and made a goggles joke with Google, which maybe it was a little funny. I didn't think it was the most hilarious thing ever. It's like, Google, Goggle, haha. And then once Ralph and Vanellope get to the eBay place or outside, they get harassed with pop-ups and ads such as get rid of belly fat and different kinds of scamming ads. One that will be important for later on is get rich playing video games. And to portray the pop-ups, they have basically salespeople harassing people with that. Actually, I think that was brilliant. I would get annoyed as well if some salesperson tried to harass me with their services to get rid of belly fat. And then finally, they go into eBay. So eBay is basically an auction place or a superstore in this world. Some of the things that were being auctioned off were a taxidermied beaver and a Beyonce chip. Maybe I guess the Beyonce reference was a little out of place. Another weird reference, I'm like, this is a children's movie, ma'am, is that they had a section specifically for lingerie. And Ralph and Vanellope actually mispronounced the word. I think they pronounced that as lingerie. I'm like, this is a children's movie? I don't think you should mention lingerie. What is the next thing they're gonna mention? Dildos? So Ralph and Vanellope think that an auction is a game of who can come up with the highest bidding number. And they were basically competing against one other user. And they were basically fighting over who could come up with the highest number. Because that's what Ralph and Vanellope think. It's a game of who can come up with the highest number. But they don't know that the number translates into real money. Like, you could come up with the number 1 million and you would own $1 million for a Sugar Rush wheel. Which is just crazy overpriced if you ask me. But obviously Ralph and Vanellope have like no internet literacy whatsoever. So they bid $27,000. And they think, oh yeah, we won. But they go up to someone and they're like, you owe us $27,000? That would freaking jump scare me, honestly. Over a Sugar Rush wheel. And they mentioned PayPal and Venmo, which here is my little gripe with the fact that they mentioned Venmo. The only country where Venmo is available is the US. And I think I watched the US version of Ralph Breaks the Internet. There are other versions of Ralph Breaks the Internet. There's a UK version, but I think I watched the US version. I watched it off a pirating site. I don't have Disney Plus, and nor do I want to support Disney, but what if you're not in the US and you hear Venmo? Like, isn't that going to be a very confusing reference? But the manager at eBay mentions that Ralph and Vanellope have 24 hours to pay for the Sugar Rush wheel. Which is kind of a trope that I am a bit tired of. Like, you have a certain amount of time to do something, and that's basically the plot of the film. Hey, I guess it kind of makes sense here. Maybe it's just trying to force a conflict. Like, basically their stupidity is the entire conflict of the film. And, oh, this one is gonna get interesting. Ralph gets so angry that he punches an eBay sign. And it hits one of the internet citizens. Or one of the squareheads. Internet users, citizens. And guess who that citizen is? I'm gonna give you a few guesses. This person had a ukulele apology. And she had like some character that was really popular and had live shows. Yeah, I'm talking about Colleen Ballinger, aka Miranda Sings. Obviously, it was in her Miranda persona. And she's like, what the heck? Where is my internet? I don't know if I can do a good Miranda impression, but I'm like, why? Like, I get at the time Miranda Sings was popular, but that woman has grooming allegations against her. Well, probably not at the time, but just because she's a popular YouTuber doesn't mean you should include her in the film. Because while it might have been funny back in the day, most people watching the film now are gonna cringe. They're gonna be like, why is there a groomer on my kid's Disney film? Anyways, Ralph and Vanellope keep getting harassed by pop-up blockers, but Ralph recalls a pop-up where he could get rich playing video games. And he decides to go through with it, and he meets a guy called JP Spamley, who is that exact pop-up that advertises Ralph and Vanellope to get rich playing video games. And the way he goes about is to retrieve certain video game items. And the most prized video game item that JP Spamley is gonna pay Ralph and Vanellope for is Shank's car from the game Slaughter Race. And Slaughter Race is considered a very dangerous game, but it is a huge prized possession amongst players of the game Slaughter Race. So Ralph and Vanellope go into the game Slaughter Race, which is kind of a parody of the game Grand Theft Auto. Like, it definitely has like the whole Grand Theft Auto aesthetic, where there are a bunch of players standing around the car, and they show actually the kids behind the players, and one of them was a boy whose grandma absolutely hated the game Slaughter Race and thought that video game would rot their brains, which is kind of a common trope. I thought that was kind of funny. One of the usernames in the game Slaughter Race that I actually thought was really funny was the name Abraham Lincoln. I actually did have a little chuckle at that. But Ralph and Vanellope successfully get Shank's car after a bunch of other players almost got it themselves, but they snatch Shank's car and they go on a car chase. And if you're wondering about the character Shank, she is voiced by Gal Gadot, who is the Queen of Zionism. So, you know, I guess that kind of checks out. I'm sure if this film came out today and they had Gal Gadot in the film, I think there would have been a lot more people boycotting it. But Ralph and Vanellope, they're on this quick car chase and they are about to beat Shank. And Vanellope uses her glitch powers to get through a dead end. And they thought, oh yeah, we lost Shank. And then Shank gets to them. And then Shank is just like weirdly impressed, but a little upset that her car was stolen. And she is someone who is really heavy on challenges while playing Slaughter Race. Like, she talked about how someone from Des Moines, Iowa wanted to buy her car. But Ralph thought Des Moines was Department of Noise. What kind of reference is that? Once the car chase was over, Ralph decides to confront Shank, doing kind of like an apology.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Shank, for stealing your car. Will you please forgive me? I will change for the better.
And as a revenge for Ralph trying to steal Shank's car, Shank decides to put a leaf blower in Ralph's face to disfigure his face and humiliate him for millions to see, which, okay, maybe it was a funny trope a long time ago, but I feel like in the 2010s, that trope where one gets humiliated and it gets posted on the internet was just so overused. I don't know, maybe it's a me thing. But Vanellope, on the other hand, loved Shank. Vanellope thought Shank was such a cool person and wanted to be a part of Slaughter Race. And Ralph and Vanellope leave Slaughter Race, and to get out, Ralph summons one of the eBay guys. Which, if you didn't know, fun fact, in the UK version, the eBay guy is voiced by the YouTuber Dan TDM. Unfortunately, he's not voiced by Dan TDM in the US version of the film. But I don't think Disney knows that Dan TDM has fans outside of the UK. But Ralph calls this guy Jackson. And Ralph wants to go to the site BuzzTube. Vanellope is a little reluctant at first, and obviously BuzzTube is a parody of YouTube. When they arrive to BuzzTube, Ralph's face is plastered all over BuzzTube. And it was the video where he had the leaf blower in his face. And BuzzTube is the place where they meet this character called Yes! Yeah, that's actually the name of the character, Yes! So basically, she controls the algorithm of BuzzTube. Before it's revealed that Ralph was a viral trend on BuzzTube, Yes called the security on him. But then he talks about how he was a part of this very viral video. And because he went viral, Yes pays him $43, which isn't enough to buy the Sugar Rush steering wheel. But as algorithms go, his video only trended for 15 seconds before something else became popular. Which I will say, actually, that was a really good portrayal of how algorithms work. And it's a good way to explain it to children. And it is especially prevalent today because if you know the TikTok algorithm, you might go viral for a few seconds, but then something else takes over. So what does Ralph do to make more money? He decides to saturate the market and become basically an influencer. He confronts Yes about the popular trends going on. And here are some of the trends that were listed. Human suffering, hot pepper challenges, game walkthroughs, screaming goats, unboxings, cooking demos, and bee puns, which obviously the hot pepper challenge was kind of a big thing in the 2010s, or just challenges in general. And I would say the same for human suffering, but I'm sure it's still popular today. I'm not really a fan of those fail videos myself, but I don't know if they still go viral. But I feel like there isn't much refreshing things about human suffering. I think today's version of human suffering is more like humiliation, if anything, rather than someone just falling and hurting themselves. But I could be wrong. One thing that they did reference was the game Fortnite, which was very big back in 2018 and is still big now with all the crossovers and stuff. I think if they made this movie today, they would probably have Hatsune Miku in Fortnite in this movie, or Ralph Sune Miku. So, because Ralph was made aware of all these trends, he decided to do all the trends in that video. Ralph made a video where he was basically Bob Ross. There was another video where he was a screaming goat, which, honestly, that isn't funny anymore, but this isn't the last time that Disney references the screaming goat. Like, they did that in Moana 2, for the love of God. But I did find the scene where the people at the office building who saw the Ralph video were like, hey, I used to play Fix-It Felix Jr. when I was a kid. And I remember Ralph from this game I played as a child. I thought that was quite interesting. Quite an interesting touch. I feel like if this was made today, it would be Ralph on TikTok making an apology video or doing some kind of TikTok dance. Like, I'm sure TikTok dances were a thing when the film came out, but the film was in production before TikTok. Like, this movie came out in November of 2018, musically transitioned into TikTok in August of 2018. And if they included TikTok, I feel like that would have been Disney's first trans character, because I think Musical.ly was kind of in the middle of a transition to TikTok. I think that would have made some parents very angry. And then Ralph makes it to the news on a show called The Danny Fernandez Show, which isn't really real. And Danny was mentioning those mysterious Ralph videos online. Where did they come from? Was it made by an AI? Which, in today's logic, probably yes. In 2018 logic, probably not. I don't think AI could have generated a video like that. But Ralph becomes a viral sensation. So another reference I saw in the film was Tumblr kind of a fandom hell site. Instagram was mentioned. And then Mashable, which actually was a name I haven't heard in years while watching that film. Mashable is still existing. It is a news source that still exists. I just don't think it's as popular as it used to be. I think its format was more for people on Facebook than people on TikTok. Within this Wreck-It Ralph video, there were scam pop-ups that appeared. And yes, hired Vanellope to be one of the pop-ups. And then Ralph and Vanellope decide to go to the website ohmydisney.com, which actually merged with Disney News. So it's no longer called ohmydisney.com, nor is it as popular. If you don't know what ohmydisney.com is, it's basically kind of like one of those sites where you can play quizzes of which Disney princess are you, or it even like gives out memes and stuff like that. The memes are obviously memes that I feel like middle-aged mothers would post. So kind of the equivalent to Minion memes. One of the users on ohmydisney.com was playing the quiz, what Disney princess am I? And she was a little girl, and she got Snow White. And when they're at the ohmydisney.com place, a remix of Let It Go plays. It feels like a convention. Which, why? A remix of Let It Go. I think that's a bit annoying. Characters such as Baymax, Buzz Lightyear, and Eeyore make an appearance. Obviously, for the product placement. Of course we wanted a crossover movie with all the Disney characters. We already had Avengers Infinity War, which made so much money in the box office earlier that year. So we needed Disney Infinity War. Like, let's combine all the Disney companies. They did not have 20th Century Fox, though, because Disney did not buy 20th Century Fox until 2019. So imagine if it was made today. You would have seen all the Avatar characters, The Simpsons, Family Guy, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Ice Age, etc. You know, hell, if this was made in 2030, you probably would have seen characters from Hazbin Hotel, for the love of God! Because, I don't know, maybe one day Disney will buy Amazon Prime. Tsum Tsums also make an appearance. If you don't know what Tsum Tsums were, they're basically a toy line of kind of like pill-shaped stuffed plushies with Disney characters. I remember I had a Tsum Tsum back in the day when they were like super popular. I don't think they really sell them anymore. Like, I think Disney is now focused on Doorables, but they were once a huge collectible commodity to have for Disney fans. Another quiz that people were playing was Ask a Groot, and a user would ask questions and Groot would be like, I am Groot, which obviously Groot was very popular back in 2018. Considering he was a part of Infinity War, he was like some teenager that would be like, I am Groot. But I think if this was made later on, we would have seen Baby Yoda, because Baby Yoda a year later took the world by storm. And when Baby Yoda came out, I don't think anybody was interested in Groot anymore. But Vanellope was popping up everywhere, and she ended up being chased by stormtroopers for unauthorized clickbait for advertising Wreck-It Ralph. So she was basically a pop-up advertising Ralph. Nick Wilde, Stan Lee, and a 2D version of Peter Pan make an appearance. And I think the 2D animation integration was actually done really well. And I kind of wish I saw more of it in this movie. I think it would have been really interesting. But I think that was actually kind of the building grounds for the Disney short Once Upon a Studio, which I think is absolutely amazing. But when Vanellope is being chased, she walks into a room and she encounters the Disney princesses, which was the entire advertising point of this movie. Like, who wouldn't want to watch a movie with all the Disney princesses? Like, you got all your favorite princesses, Cinderella, Snow White, Rapunzel, Elsa, all in one room together. One of the weirdest things that I hear, Jasmine specifically was mentioning daddy issues to Vanellope. Like, you got daddy issues? Vanellope's like, no. And another thing, TikTok actually had a popular sound where it was like,
do animals talk to you?
No.
Kidnapped or enslaved?
No.
Look like a
Yes!
She is a princess!
I still think that sound is funny. Like, don't come after me. Do I have a sense of humor? Probably not. I'm 22, but I think I'm mentally 13, okay? Don't come after me. But the one question that made the princesses be convinced that Vanellope was a princess was, did a big, strong man come into your life and change it? And Vanellope's like, yes. But she didn't have all the other qualifications of a princess. There are a lot of theories out there of if Vanellope could be a Disney princess. I know there's a criteria out there. I don't know if it's as big anymore. But I guess, yeah, Vanellope could be a Disney princess. But the Disney princesses were basically on-stage celebrities. And C-3PO was kind of their agent. C-3PO out of anybody. So C-3PO comes into the room and tells the princesses, hey, you need to go back up on stage. So Vanellope kind of leaves them. And then they go back to Ralph. And Ralph, while he is happy about the fame he's getting, he does notice something. He gets a lot of hate comments. Ralph is fat and ugly. You know, Ralph, you suck. Stuff like that. And it upsets him. The comments are just so poorly written, and it's kind of hard to sympathize with Ralph in that way. Okay, I'm glad you acknowledge hate comments, but the whole scene feels funnier rather than sad because some of the hate comments are just so basic level. Like, yeah, I'm probably gonna get a million comments on this video saying that I'm ugly. And you know what? Maybe it's better than like some kind of death threat. I don't think Ralph was getting any death threats. However, yes, recommends Ralph not to read the comments. And I totally understand that. I can get behind it. If you're sensitive to hate comments, I wouldn't recommend reading them. But because Ralph went viral, he earned $30,000 to buy the steering wheel. So he can buy the steering wheel. Woo! Problem solved! However, another conflict comes up because Vanellope loves Slaughter Race. Ralph wants Vanellope to be with him. So basically, Ralph kind of turns into a clingy man baby, which honestly, it made me slightly uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Vanellope looks like a child. Ralph is an adult. Like, I don't think a plot line where a grown-ass man who is the main character wanting to be with, like, a child is comfortable to watch. He is convinced that Vanellope has been brainwashed by Slaughter Race because Vanellope does not want to be with him. So Vanellope sings a song about wanting to be a part of Slaughter Race. And I could see her motives. Like, I'm gonna be honest. I've lived in the same place my entire life. And I actually dream of moving to California because that's where the animation industry is. And where I'm from, we don't really have animation. So I totally understand Vanellope's motives to be in Slaughter Race. Like, considering Vanellope was always portrayed as this misfit, I totally understand. But because Ralph realizes that Vanellope wants to be in Slaughter Race, Ralph decides to download viruses, but like non-harmful viruses that would hurt Vanellope. It would just hurt Slaughter Race. And he wanted to make an ethical virus. There is no ethical computer viruses. They destroy computers. And in this movie, viruses are represented with eels. I find it very interesting, actually, because eels create electric shocks. And the electric shocks can represent how viruses spread. The viruses work by scanning for insecurities. And the insecurities are basically the insecurities of the internet citizens. So it will scan for Vanellope's insecurities. It will scan for Ralph's insecurities. And the viruses went into Slaughter Race. They started copying and pasting and spreading around. But Slaughter Race had to restart because of the virus, and Vanellope had to get out of Slaughter Race because her code wasn't written in Slaughter Race. And if she didn't escape, she would have been deleted. So Vanellope leaves Slaughter Race. Ralph confesses that he downloaded a virus in Slaughter Race. And if you remember from the first movie, or Ralph had a necklace that said, "You are my hero," from Vanellope, that he wore all the time. Well, Vanellope takes it off Ralph, throws it out, breaks it in half. But, you know, when they get out of Slaughter Race, the conflict isn't done. The virus scans Ralph's insecurities and creates a bunch of little Ralphs, and they turn into big Ralphs. They're basically like a Ralph zombie. So Ralph is just behaving like a toxic, clingy ex. And the virus is basically called the Wreck-It Ralph virus because everybody is getting that virus on their computer. It's like every time you check social media, you have Ralph's face on it. And Ralph and Vanellope shelter with Knowsmore, and Knowsmore looks up how to delete the virus, and one of the weird suggestions was to put all the clones in therapy. I'm like, how could you put 1 billion clones in therapy? That must be really expensive. They must need 1 billion therapists as well. But the second option, is the option that they go with, was delete all the Rolf clones. And while this was going on, Rolf, Vanellope, and Yes joins Rolf and Vanellope when they're trying to, delete all the clones. They crash into a Pinterest building, and Pinterest is portrayed with a bunch of paintings and even little pins everywhere. I kind of liked it. It was kind of interesting. They also showed Wikipedia, which was described as a huge dictionary book, which is also something I could get behind. However, what about all those wiki fandoms there are? There are so many specific ones, like Chaotic Neutral Characters Wiki Fandom, Tumblr Sexy Men Wiki, or Sexypedia, stuff like that. Are there books for that? I'd buy the Sexypedia. I can get 1 million pictures of Sans from Undertale from that. And then Virus gets a hold of Vanellope, and Rolf confronts the virus by telling the virus to let Vanellope go, which kills the virus. It's kind of a tropey thing. But when the virus dies off, Rolf kind of falls to his death, but he gets saved by the Disney princesses, gets put in a Snow White dress, goes into bed, and gets kissed by Prince Naveen as a frog. Interesting touch. I feel like it was played for laughs, and it was a little funny. And then everything is solved, there's news reports about how the Rolf virus is gone, and it's probably going to be part of Lost Media of 2018. I'm sure Lost Media YouTubers will cover all the videos that were affected by the Rolf virus and the posts that were affected by Rolf. And then Rolf accepts that Vanellope wants to be a part of Slaughter Race, which I actually kind of like. I think if Vanellope just went back to Sugar Rush, I feel like that would have been very expected. I think that was actually a good twist. And then, because they were able to afford the wheel, Sugar Rush is fixed. Felix and Calhoun, remember those characters? Yeah, they got rid of their Sugar Rush children that they once adopted, and they were talking about parenting and while they were in Sugar Rush, and when the cars went, you couldn't hear what they were talking about. It's probably really inappropriate, so they don't want kids to hear it. And then the movie ends, except there is a post-credit scene that was kind of a meme. Do you remember pancake, 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 milkshake, milkshake, milkshake? Where they had Baby Moana play it. So yeah, they had the pancake milkshake scene in the end credits. And then the bunny explodes. So yeah, basically Baby Moana screams over that. Kind of a bit of a funny scene. It was in the trailers, and it was a meme before the movie came out. So overall, I would actually say Rolf Breaks the Internet was kind of a good movie, but I think its biggest issue, which I have mentioned in the beginning of the video, was product placement and some character assassinations. Come on, Rolf was a clingy man baby. We hardly saw Felix and Calhoun. But at the same time, I think it definitely gave good insight on the internet and social networks itself that the Emoji Movie couldn't do. The film would have definitely been much different if it was made today. It probably would be like Rolf Breaks ChatGPT or something like that, considering how Disney has bought OpenAI. Come on, Disney. I'm sure once Disney Plus introduces the generative AI slop features, I'm sure someone will make a fake trailer of Rolf Breaks ChatGPT. I wonder if Disney is gonna sell Rolf to OpenAI, in which they said they're gonna sell at least 200 of their characters to ChatGPT. I could also see them make references to Skibidi Toilet and Italian Brain Rot if it was made today. I think if Rolf made a viral video today, he would probably be edited into Skibidi Toilet or something like that instead of the goat scream. Because Gen Alpha's interests have definitely showed its true colors within the last few years. Memes and stuff. Back in 2018, most of Gen Alpha wasn't very sentient to have memes or anything like that. But now, companies are literally profiting off of Gen Alpha memes such as Italian Brain Rot, Skibidi Toilet, and even 6-7, which they're kind of micro trends. People are getting annoyed with them within a couple of days of them being popular. Even Dubai Chocolate and Labubu's Which, in fact, Sony Pictures Animation decided to announce a Labubu movie. Do you think by the time it will come out, people will care about Labubus anymore? No. Back in 2018, while yes, trends came and went, most of the trends would last maybe a couple of months. Now, with TikTok and most short-form content, trends would last days. And now that people can AI generate stuff, internet trends can just be created within a day and go within a day. And not to mention how many trends have been like monetized within companies because companies can profit off of it. They can sell toys to children's memes because children love this meme and they're gonna want to buy toys with Tung Tung Sahur or whatever. I don't care to know the names of the Italian brain rot characters if you're wondering, so please don't correct me because I don't want to know their names. But Ralph Breaks the Internet was a product of its time. It was not an amazing movie, but I wouldn't say it was horrible either. I just think it is a good movie to have a conversation about. I turned 15 in 2018, so I'm quite familiar with many of the memes referenced in Ralph Breaks the Internet. But would kids today be familiar with it? No, there's no Skibidi Toilet, there's no Italian brain rot or whatever, and I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. Did the film age well? No, but honestly it's kind of a time capsule. So thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I know this was a long one, thank you, and like, subscribe, it really helps the channel, and comment what is the most embarrassing car you've been in. Like, what car would you be just so embarrassed to be in out of all the cars you saw? Like, it could be a certain car brand or even just an embarrassing magnet or sticker on a car. So I guess this is the end.